Hello, a good Erev Shabbos, and welcome to yet another installment of the Kehillat Sharei Torah virtual Shabbat Drasha. You might have asked yourself in recent months, who exactly is minding the store when we're not in shul? In the couple of months that it's been, to our sadness that we haven't met in our beloved KST for davening and for learning, the shul has not gone unattended, so don't worry. Our custodial staff has been on a limited schedule, but working on small cleaning projects and keeping the place in running order. We've had our air conditioning service just this week, so when you will return, we'll be in cool, climate-controlled comfort. We've switched out our Shabbos morning security patrol for more randomly spaced drive-by security inspections from our security company, and I've invited the police to use our parking lot whenever they like. The alarm is set around the clock 24/7, and we're keeping all the internal doors locked all the time. Alan is here periodically, keeping the bills paid and the wheels turning, and here I am in this, speaking to you from a very echoey shul. If you can hear the echo a little bit, it's because we've transformed our sanctuary into a physically distant compliant space in conformity with the province's recommendations for houses of worship. So when we come back on a limited basis, it'll be with everyone's safety and well-being, both health-wise and neshama-wise, keeping all that in mind. Parshas Korach that we're reading this week, living with this week, usually gets a lot of mileage out of the title character's rebellion. Korach and his band of merry men challenge Moshe's authority. So usually we use the opportunity to tell people, don't question authority, because it won't be good. Interestingly, it's usually people in authority who are telling other people, don't question authority so much. There may be deeper meanings here, like in God we trust. For one, Moshe is actually sympathetic to Korach's complaint, according to Rashi, but he explains it's not just about what you want or I want, it's something different. But leaving that aside for a moment, tucked in the back of the Parsha, in the middle of the sixth Aliyah there, nestled in the middle of the verses, is a whole instruction about our very topic of the day, safeguarding the sanctuary. God explains to Aaron HaKohen how not only his own family, the children of Kahas, are going to be specially designated guardians of the Mishkan, also their cousins, Bnei Gershon and Bnei Merari, are going to share in that holy responsibility. The three families that will actually surround the Mishkan, they'll surround the core of Machane Yisrael, the Jewish camp, as it travels through the desert, protecting it on all four sides. Now, I'll give you a minute to do that math. How is it exactly that three families can guard four sides of the camp, of the Mishkan, the tabernacle? How does that work exactly? Well, you put Moshe and Aaron and their families standing as the honor guards on the far eastern side, the point of entry. That's how it works. The Rambam and the Sefer HaChinuch, two of the main halachists from the period of the Rishonim, the early decisors and organizers of Jewish law, debate in their respective books what exactly is the enduring principle at stake in this conversation about guarding the tabernacle. Since the journey through the desert is going to be a temporary thing, right? It was supposed to be just a couple of weeks or months, turned into a 40-year sojourn, but that wasn't the original intention. In any case, it came to an end, right? We went into the land of Israel. So is this mitzvah that they have to guard the tabernacle, guard the Mishkan, is that a mitzvah for all times, or it's just part of the journey? Of course, as we know, the journey itself is part of the journey. So Rambam writes there's actually two mitzvahs here. There's a positive one and a negative one. Positive mitzvah, an instruction that we have to guard the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and a negative mitzvah, prohibition, never stop guarding the temple. So it opens the door to the permanency of the mitzvah. The Mishnah in tractates Tamid and Midot discussed this in temple terms later when we moved into Israel and built the temple there, where the guards exactly were supposed to stand, what were they supposed to wear, did they wear regular Kohen clothes or not, maybe, because they weren't doing the actual service, they were just doing the guarding. Were they allowed to sleep in their priestly clothes if sleeping was part of the guarding? Not so good to have your guards asleep, but that question comes up. When exactly they had to wash their hands, when they had to immerse in a mikveh. If you want to get a real sense of the structure and order of the temple's operation, sort of an org chart as it were, for the temple, this is the place to look for the personnel operations of our most holy meeting place. So at the moment, you notice we don't have a Mishkan or a Beis HaMikdash, no temple in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount as yet. So the fact is, this is our Mishkan. This is our holy and designated place of communal worship and gathering and learning. So we can ask ourselves, what are our obligations with respect to the sacredness and the specialness of the shul, the synagogue, the Beit HaKnesset, the house of gathering? There's a number of areas of Jewish custom and halacha that have something to say about the shul and its specific sanctity. It's more than we have time to cover today, but there are laws in Shulchan Aruch about building a shul and the extent to which members of a community can compel other members to contribute to the cost of the building. Nowadays, institutions are completely voluntary, right? So it's a little bit different. Nevertheless, this discussion shows the importance, even the necessity, of supporting the fiscal well-being of a shul. So what does that mean? Get ready to answer the call for your golf sponsorship pledge. That's going to be coming out in weeks to come, and we do need everyone's help as best you can. Obviously, this is not the easiest time for any shul financially, but we're all pitching in to do our very best. In the shul itself, we're supposed to conduct ourselves with an added degree of reverence and respect, not to act frivolously, and we're not even allowed to use the shul as a shortcut to get from one place to the other. Certainly not supposed to conduct ourselves with what the Talmud calls in a number of different places, kalut rosh, kalus rosh, lightheadedness, sort of frivolity. Once as a student, I was standing talking to the rabbi in the shul where I davened, and we were having fun, a few laughs, maybe a few jokes. So this new guy comes over, a newbie, and he says, "Hey, doesn't it say that you guys are supposed to behave extra seriously in the shul? What's going on? Did I read it wrong? Did I read it wrong?" We were a little chastised. The rabbi recovered his footing a little bit more faster than I did. And he said, "Yes, you're right. It does actually say that." And at the same time, this is a place we feel comfortable. We're here every day. This is like a home to us. So sometimes we behave like we're at home. Not in a disrespectful way, but in a good sense, a comfortable sense. I like that answer. Not sure the guy bought it completely, but he kept coming, so in the end, it's okay. People often speak about the problem of talking in shul. We're all quite obviously happy to see each other in shul when we get there, that's for sure. On the high holidays, how much more so. So we share information, how are you doing, nice to see you, and all that. Our main purpose in being in shul, of course, is to talk to God, though. So that's the focal point of our communication when we're here. Some people, some rabbis, get very upset. They take it very personally when there's talking in shul. They bang on the bima, they stop the chazan until it quiets down. I remember once davening in a shul of a friend and a close friend, a colleague, who stopped and made the shh sign when the talking got too loud. And I thought to myself, please God, I hope I never do that. So if anyone doubts that Hashem is kind, if anyone doubts that Hashem listens to our prayers and answers them in the affirmative, I consider my being a Kehilat Shari Torah the answer to my prayers. I don't know about your prayers. What you were davening for is a different thing. But I've never once, I don't think, ever had to say shh when we daven here, because we who daven here actually daven here. That's what you hear. You may have observed that in the shul, some people try to avoid turning their backs on the Aron Kodesh, like I'm doing right at this very moment. Right behind me here is the Aron HaKodesh, and I obviously have my back to it because I have my face to you. Okay, not so much to you, to a camera really, but if we were here in shul, like we're imagining ourselves being, I would be facing all of you, so I would have my back to the shul. So it's not so nice to do that. It's the only way, unless I stand in the back and talk towards the front and make everybody turn around, everybody will get a stiff neck, so we don't want that. So I try to remember, and I've seen many rabbis do this, that when they finish their talk, whenever that is, and they head back to their seat, they actually turn and kiss the paroches as a sign of extra respect, because we've just had our backs turned to it for a while. Anyway, not everybody has the duty to stand here and plopple away for a good bit of time on Shabbos morning or other mornings. So you'll see that some people avoid, in any case, turning their backs on the Aron. They will actually back down. They'll back away from the Duchan when they walk down the steps, or when they back away, even back away from the shul. which is a commendable thing, commendable practice, very nice thing to do. Of course, if you're the very least unsure of your footing, you should most definitely walk down forwards, hold the handrail, maybe even hold somebody else. In any case, the Torah does say, v'chai bahem, we're supposed to live by the mitzvahs and not, God forbid, the opposite. Similarly, you will also see people back out of the shul. Sometimes people will they don't want to turn their back on the ark or turn their back on the synagogue, so they'll make a small move to be at least a little bit facing the ark when they walk out of shul. Maybe glance at it, some people blow a kiss, something like that. And these very same people, if they have to walk across the shul from one door to the other for whatever reason, you will notice them sometimes sit down in a chair, in one of the chairs, and recite a verse or two, like Ashrei Yoshua Veisecha, something like that, so that their coming into shul has a purpose, an actual purpose for being there. They accomplish something by saying a verse of Psalms or a verse of Torah, rather than just using the shul as a way to get from here to there, as we spoke about before. All this comes under the laws and customs of respecting the sanctity of the place, and we are ultra sensitive to the holiness of Torah and the Aron that rests in it, so some are careful for that reason not to turn their backs on it. We should not spit in the shul, it says, probably from the days when people were a lot more accustomed to spitting in public. Thankfully, we don't do that too much in our times. And we should, of course, not throw rubbish on the floor. Beis Yehuda writes that there should be trash cans placed outside the shul, which we have in the foyer and at different spots throughout the shul hallways and the social hall, so we check that box. Generally speaking, people do not eat in shul, particularly when there's a relatively new carpet, as we have here. But for a seudat mitzvah, a meal that accompanies a bris or a bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah, it's allowed. Sometimes we say a little l'chaim with some schnapps and some cake in the shul when there's a yortzeit, sometimes downstairs, but sometimes at Lou's table in the back. So since that's part of the mitzvah of observing yortzeit, we do that. Certainly people would eat shalosh seudos in the shul back in the days before the invention of the social hall. And of course, there's the issue of seats. We would like to have our own seat when we come to shul, and oftentimes we slide into our comfortable, accustomed place with no bother. Once in a while, it will happen that a guest in the shul, somehow or other, gets there first and somehow sneaks into our chair and occupies that, which gives rise to a joke that's in the oldie but goodie class. A certain man has to travel to another town for a business meeting, but he wants to make sure he catches a minyan, davens, when he's there. So he finds out there's only 2 shuls in the town, and wouldn't you know it, they're both called Beth Israel. The catch is, one is an Orthodox shul, and one is the Jews for, you know who. So the guy goes to his rabbi, he says, Rabbi, what am I going to do? How am I going to know if I'm in the right shul? So the rabbi gives him some very sage advice. He says, here's what you do. Just go to either shul and at the beginning of services and sit down in any chair and start davening. If a person comes over to you and welcomes you and asks if you're from out of town, if you're visiting someone, do you like it here? We hope you come back and all this, you know you're in the wrong place. You should get up and leave as soon as possible. But if you sit down at the beginning of davening and at some point in davening somebody comes over to you and says, hey, you're in my seat, you're okay. That's the Orthodox shul. Thankfully, that Musar story is also inapplicable for the most part here at KST, because I really only recall 1 or maybe 2 times in many years that there was any kerfuffle about seats, and as it happens, it was not on the high holidays. Anyway, when you see the seating here, it's going to be interesting. You'll see with the spacing. I mentioned before that we've made our shul physically distancing compliant, so I'll give you a little sneak preview of what that looks like. Let me just adjust the camera here. I'm going to take you on a little tour. If you get seasick easily, you better not watch this part. But if you can handle the motion. Okay, so far so good. Looks normal, right? Oh, wait 1 second. What's going on here? See, we've spaced out the chairs so that there is, in fact, 6 feet of space between each person wherever they're sitting. I'm going to flip around quickly. Hold on to your seatbelts. Look over there, same thing. See, we've got 6 feet between each. So, in days or weeks to come, when we do resume, we will, in fact, we'll be able to meet the city and province and all that requirements, best practices For distancing, keeping ourselves separate one from the other. We'll have, maybe you saw on the back, we have hand sanitizer out there, and we'll have sign-ups, the whole thing. We will be doing our absolute best to make sure everybody's okay. So back to being in your place. We learned the Gemara a couple of months ago, I don't know, a year ago maybe, in Brachas, that says that whoever has a set place for davening merits that the God of Abraham will be with that person. The rationale behind this, the Gemara explained that if a person is careful about where they sit and where they stand for davening, so then it's more conducive to focus and concentration during davening. Nowadays they would call that mindfulness, but about 500 years before they invented that concept, the Maharsha, Rabbi Shmuel Edels of Lublin, was already commenting on that passage in the Talmud and saying that just like the offerings, were the korbanot in the Mishkan, later the temple, the Beis HaMikdash, were offered in a very particular place in the temple, on the altar, and even a particular place on the altar itself. Since our prayers are in place of offerings, we should be no less careful about where we put ourselves to daven. You have a dedicated place. So having a place to daven, both at home, by the way, as well as in shul, applies to men and to women. So the way we sort of finesse the "you're in my seat" problem is that we say that place means place more than particular chair. Usually if someone's in your seat and you can sit next to them or behind them, make them nervous a little bit, you're looking over their shoulder, or you could sit even in front of them, whatever it is, we say that if you're within Daled Amos, 4 Amos, which is about 6 feet as it works out, that's still considered your place. There's another opinion that says if you can see your place, if you can visually see your place. In other words, if you have to be sitting the other side of the shul for whatever reason, if you can see the place where you usually sit, so that's also considered your place. So in any case, we are going to have an interesting situation now, as you just saw, where each chair is in fact 6 feet apart from the next. So we're going to see how that goes. Usually most people in our minyan are friendly and flexible, so I'm sure we're going to be just fine. Maybe the last thing we'll say about seats, because it unfortunately is a little bit appropriate for some of the families in our kehillah, is the custom of switching seats when Rahman al-Atzlan, someone's in mourning. There's a long-standing custom that for the 30 days of mourning, or for the year for a parent, we change our seats, sit in a different place. So there's an interesting conflict of customs here. It's interesting when things come into clash with each other. We are not supposed to mourn publicly on Shabbat. So even someone who's in the middle of Shiva is allowed to put on their leather shoes and even come to shul and sit in a regular seat. They don't have to sit on a low chair because we don't do the public public customs of mourning on Shabbat. Privately, yes, but in public, we don't, because Shabbat is like the world to come, when we're not going to have to worry about death and mourning or anything. We're all going to be together. However, changing your seat is an obvious sign of mourning, right? If someone's sitting in a different place from where they usually sit, that must mean what? Must mean that they've lost somebody. So now, if you sit in your non-usual seat, isn't that sort of public mourning on Shabbos? So they write that generally people are lenient with this, and once they find a different seat for the mourning period, that sort of becomes their place for the time being. They can even stay there on Shabbat with no problem. Hopefully, no one will mourn because everyone will stay healthy. And also, hopefully, very soon we'll be able to join back together for a minyan in shul that's been watched over by Hashem and some of his staff in recent months. And all these questions of where should I sit and who's going to daven and all that are going to become real again, not just theoretical. The best way we can guard our mikdash ma'at, our little sanctuary here, is to use it. But in the meantime, please know that it's been reliable, and conscientious hands waiting for you. Everyone should stay healthy and have a wonderful, peaceful, and restful and uplifting Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom.